She ain't never gon' trust me, I got way too many secrets and I hide too much. Too many women from my past come up and she be on them. We get caught up in the moment, blending light with love. Truth is I never lie enough, that sounds tough, but not as tough as making something out of nothing. Pushing me away when she knows she need the love, and still I beat it. Michael Jackson on percussion and she repeated. Lauryn Hill repercussion fussing. Let her sort out her emotions up in Bay and breezy. We should focus on the money just to make it easy. She believe in me but she don't believe me. We ain't even back together but she wanna leave me. Catch her going through my phone, that's a breach for you. Saying I ain't never loved her, that's a reach for you. They won't even put their name on the lease for you. How them lames gon' come replace me for you? Yeah. Can't nobody beat me for you.
And that's this dope track phase out in the background. Welcome to Give 'Em More Podcast. It's your favorite host. I say that for the intro, but I am your one and only favorite host. Tuning in. That track right there is called One and Only by my boy Tony 7, who will actually be featuring on this episode. He's a dope artist, but he has so much to offer that I asked him, instead of talking about the music, let's talk about spirituality. I would also like to thank everybody who tuned in to episode 1. It is out on a lot of major platforms right now. Give 'Em More Podcasts is out on Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, and more to come. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I hope everyone's having a blessed day. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Mo Williams checking in, your favorite host who love to do the most, and you know I like to boast. And this is Give 'Em Mo Podcast. And today we got a special guest. We got a real special guest. Whether you call him Tony G, Tony 7, the artist, the philanthropist, the CBD guy, the man that know everybody. We got Tony in the building today. Tony, make some noise.
Hey, what's going on, Mo?
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, like you said, I'm Tony 7, or Tony G, whatever you want to call me. Just call me Tony. And I do a little bit of everything: CBD, music, philanthropy. That's funny. But I do try to give as much as I can to good causes, so that's why I'm here.
Yeah, you know, I reached out to you. I asked you, could you come out? You said you'll make time. Even though, you know, you had a busy day, you still stopped by. Yeah, but today, you know, we want to do something a little different. We want to get in touch with your spiritual side. I know most people probably, you know, ask you about your music and things like that, or, you know, inquire you about CBD products or whatever they inquire you about. But today we want to get into that other side that people may not know that you're so deep into, and that's your spiritual side. So kind of like give us the basis. I don't know if you was used to be a Christian. When I say spiritual, when did you reach that point in your life where you started looking into horoscopes and stuff like that? And when did you reach that point where you quote unquote freed yourself or became woke? And have you then been able to tie that back to religion? Just kind of give us a breakdown of how it all started, you know, where you started. Did you grow up in the church? Did you go to church? You know, kind of give people the story, and we're going to go from there.
All right, well, that's an interesting question. It's not an easy answer, but I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. This is supposed to be a city of churches. But I actually didn't grow up in the church. Both of my parents had churchy backgrounds and decided that, you know, that wasn't for their child, and they kind of let us go to church whenever we wanted to. My mother actually used to drop me off at church, and I used to have to catch a ride home with one of my friends.
So why would they had church backgrounds but they didn't, you know, necessarily force y'all to go?
I mean, I think it's the same reason why a lot of young people of this generation don't go to church. I think they see kind of what it does to people, especially coming from smaller towns, how it kind of runs people's whole lives. And I think they decided, you know, just like they decided to leave that small town and head to the cities, that mindset wasn't necessarily the frame that they wanted to raise their children in.
It's kind of funny you said that, because I grew up in a small town. Dillon, South Carolina. And for the first 18 years of my life, I pretty much went to church about 40 weeks out of the year. About 40, at least 40. I was in Western Chapel AME Church. And shout out to the home church. And then when I got to Charlotte, and I was kind of, I ain't going to say free, but I'm going to say free. When I was kind of free from my mother's, I ain't going to say she forced me, but she forced me. My mother making me go to church. I didn't go no more because I guess since I grew up in a small town and I went so much, my problem was I didn't want to step into one of these bigger facilities and churches.
That's understandable. I mean, my dad had an AME background. My mother had a Baptist background. I did end up getting into the church heavy, but I just didn't grow up in there. Growing up, I was more like all the way through high school, like the guy you saw at what's it called, Vacation Bible School, and then I'd be up there, get a couple of girls' numbers, show up there for about 2 weeks. After that, and then you never see me again until next year at Vacation Bible School.
So you was at church pimping?
Pretty much. I definitely, I ain't gonna say the name of the church, but you know.
You ain't gonna name drop the church?
I ain't gonna name drop the church, but you know, I will say that our fellow friend Gore, his brother is who I was going to church with.
Oh, I know you was up to no good then. You went with Gore.
Well, they was the one corrupting me.
That's what I'm saying.
It's put me on 3 6 Mafia and stuff, and you know that's what they had me listening to. They was the ones in church, not me. But all that said, I actually got into church in college around my sophomore year. I started dating a woman who is now the mother of my child. We're no longer together. Who was real deep in the apostolic church. And I kind of got into church that way. I was kind of dabbled in, I was a little darker mindset coming out of high school. I had an infatuation with death in general. So that's more what captured my mindset more so than, you know, church or religion. I used to write a lot of poetry about the Grim Reaper and things like that. But when I got up there, it was kind of new to me. Most of my friends were either Christian or Rastas at the time. And the church kind of got me in because this particular church didn't necessarily judge me for who I was. Back then I was a different type of guy. I was wearing bandanas and stuff and coming to church smelling like weed, but they would let me come in and actually sit there and ask questions and talk. I think the one thing that made me actually start going to that church was I asked the pastor one day, was it a sin to smoke weed? And he started to answer one way, and then he stopped and he picked up a lollipop, and he said, well, is this lollipop a sin? And I was like, nah, it's a lollipop. And then he's like, well, if this lollipop gets in between you and God, is it a sin? And that's how he left the answer, and I liked that answer so much that I started going to his church and listening to his teaching.
So basically, as long as the weed don't come between you and God, the preacher was saying that it is fine by him. Am I hearing that right?
I mean, anything can kind of distract you. I mean, you want to say between you and God. I'm kind of elevated beyond that, you know, churchy mindset. But yeah, I mean, anything that kind of captivates your life, we like to use the term like selling your soul. Anything that overwhelms you to where that becomes more important than the common right or what you would deem to be like acceptable. If you're willing to sacrifice everything for it, it doesn't matter if it's a cheeseburger. If you decide you're going to kill something for a cheeseburger, then that cheeseburger just took your soul and made you evil for some reason.
And it probably was good.
It probably was to you.
Probably was worth it. Probably was worth it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, within the mindset of what you deem worth it and not worth it, that's where that lies. Beyond that, I started parting from the church towards the end of that relationship, which was a very long relationship. It was like between 7 and 9 years. But I had gone very deep into studying the Bible. I probably read the Bible like 2 times through, among other texts. But the mother of my child, one of the main arguments we used to have was over astrology, and I wasn't into astrology back then. I just knew I was a Taurus, and she would say stuff like, well, you got a Venus in Gemini, so I know you're cheating, and stuff like that. And I did have no, I was like, well, I'm a Taurus. I don't know what you're talking about.
You got a Venus in Gemini, so she was advanced, huh?
Oh yeah, no, she knew what she was talking about back then, but I wasn't cheating. I was, I was capable of it, but I just never did it. It just wasn't in my Taurian nature, in my opinion. But after we broke up is when I actually started looking more into the different signs and different aspects of your chart. I actually started out with looking in the cusp, because both of my parents are cusp signs. My mother was a cusp of power, which is a Taurus and Aries cusp. He actually has the same birthday as Hitler. And my dad was the cusp of magic, which is a Cancer Gemini cusp. And I started there, and then between being single and mingling in zodiac groups, I started actually looking into my chart and looking at spirituality in that sense.
And what is the chart called?
Natal charts. If you get a natal chart done, it'll tell you different placements and different things about you as a person that kind of build your core nature. It's not going to predict everything about you. There are certain things that just affect you, whether it's you being white or black, your upbringing, whether you're rich or poor, what city you were born in. But as far as your core nature and what you do, your natal chart can kind of reveal how you are emotionally, how you communicate, how you love, how you display anger, passion, your general nation to the public, a lot of different aspects about the core you.
So kind of like give us an example like of a natal chart. Not necessarily, but tell us like a piece of your natal chart, how it would affect you, I guess what house is in, things like that. Like just give an example so when the person look at their natal chart, they know like kind of have a basis of what to look for.
Okay. Well, like me personally, I'm a Taurus sun sign. Your sun sign is pretty much what you know when you're looking up your horoscope and stuff, and you say, oh, I'm a Taurus. That means I eat a lot of food and I'm stubborn, and some of that is true to my nature. I do love food. I like to say the term determined instead of stubborn. But the other aspects would be like my moon is in Aquarius, which means I can be very emotionally aloof. I'm not necessarily in touch with my emotions like that. Doesn't mean I don't have them. Just means that I'm not necessarily the best at my emotional state. It just kind of makes me not the best in my emotional state, but helps me detach very well. I usually fall very deep, and then when I get cold, I get very cold. My Venus in Gemini, is my ex said, is supposed to be like a very unfaithful placement. It's not necessarily unfaithful. It just means that Venus is your love sign. The moon, what I was talking about with Aquarius, is an emotional sign or your emotional planet. But in my Venus, it kind of gives me a duality there. I usually like variety in love. I don't like stagnant people. It can also mean that I have the capability of cheating. I could probably carry on 2 relationships very well without the people even knowing what's going on. But I think the other part of those placements, hold on 1 second, let me get a drink of water.
Tony's losing his voice. You all right?
Yeah, I must have been getting ready to say something that's going to get me in trouble, so let me get back to it. But the other part of those placements with the Venus and Gemini just means I have a lot of versatility in love, in a love for different arts. I'm usually going to be doing multiple things. As far as my Mercury. My Mercury is in Aries, and Mercury is the planet of communication. So Aries kind of makes me a very direct communicator. I'm not necessarily elegant when I communicate, but I do convey my message very directly and to the point. I'm very blunt in certain aspects, especially with my moon sign. And my Mars is in Capricorn, which is Mars is kind of like your passionate anger. Some people say your sex sign, but it actually, Capricorn means that I have a very controlled nature as far as my passion, and I don't, just have passion that lashes out everywhere. I can control it, and with the right person, I tend to excel. All those things said, what I was actually going to say earlier was, even though the Venus in Gemini is probably an unfaithful placement normally, your placements actually affect each other. So that's what kind of makes you unique. So even if you might, like Mo's a Virgo, he might not be like every other Virgo that you meet because of the other placements that he has in his chart.
My moon is Scorpio, so.
Oh yeah, see, Scorpio moons, those guys are crazy, but
Ain't nothing wrong with being a little crazy. But like I said, you could say I grew up in the church, but just to talk about religion, and that aspect, like, I guess my problem with church was I don't think I saw it like other people did. I felt like part of it was a show and part of it was real. So while going to church, I would see the people in there with the worst kids, shouting the loudest, dancing, everything. Oh Lord, thank you Jesus, this and that, And I'm not gonna say everybody's real. I actually believe some people, especially in the South, actually love God and they love the Spirit, and the choir can move them, the preacher can move them. But here's the thing that really got to me was my mother made me go to church faithfully. My grandma would be there. My granddaddy, when he was able, he would be there sitting in the back of the church with some of the other men of the church. But I've never once seen my mother shout or anything. She might raise her hand, she might, quietly say, thank you God, this and that. But I never seen her like pass out or anything. I remember one time it was the most, to me it was funny. Right, to some it's bad. To me it was funny. You know how the preacher touch people's head at the pulpit and they pass out and they come with the white blanket and they put it over. Well, they did that to everybody until they got to my mama, and she just kind of kneeled down and didn't pass out, none of that. And I was like, so what's real and what's fake? But as I'm 25 now, and I understand that I believe it all was real, as real as that person made it. I don't believe it was real or fake. It was real versus fake anymore. I believe, just like you go to a club, there's some people posted up, some people got the dance moves, some people aggressive, want to fight. I look at church the same way. You got some people who are quiet and reserved, like my mother. You got people like me who's watching everybody to see what's real, what's fake. And you got those people who have no shame and they're going to worship and praise the way they want to. And I believe you need all those different types of people. I believe the preacher touching the head might be a little excessive, them passing out. But who knows? Maybe they did feel something. I can't say they didn't. I can't say they did. So I guess that's when I graduated high school and I went to college, that's when I started crossing over. And my spirituality didn't start off with, it actually did start off with a zodiac sign. My homeboy, he's a Virgo. He was born on September 6th. I was born on the 9th. He was like, bro, you a Virgo. This is why you act this way, that way. I'm like, it's 2014. I'm like, okay, I ain't know what a Virgo was my whole life. But then I looked into it, and I was like, a lot of this makes sense. Some of it don't. What am I missing? I didn't know about the natal chart until like 2017, 18. So I just looked at it like, blah. I never really read daily horoscopes because in my Virgo ways, I research plenty of websites. So one day I look it up and say, oh, you're going to meet the love of your life. And then one day they're going to say, oh, you're going to break up with the love of your life. And this is all in the same day. You look at different websites, they all say different things. I'm like, okay, so what is wrong? So then I started looking in the yearly horoscopes and getting outlooks and stuff like that. And then I kind of left that part of my life alone. My spiritual journey came into the whole Illuminati phase. That's my spiritual journey, was conspiracy. I went hard for a year, scared myself, looking up Baphomet, people selling their souls, the videos everywhere, Jay-Z, sacrifices, this, and that, and I'm just like, wow, now I look at it like, wow, you have to go through that phase. Mine lasted for about a year. You even come up to me now and talking about sacrifices and stuff, I'm just tell you I don't care. Because I just feel like, I can't get into that stuff,
Yeah, if you have that mindset, you might as well just give up on life. I kind of went through that Illuminati phase in the midst of my Christianity journey, and it was more like I don't know. It kind of makes you feel like you can't be successful without either doing something evil or gay or whatever they say it takes to join the Illuminati. But yeah, I mean, as far as what you were saying about the church is interesting. I think the main problem with Christianity is, like you said, everything is necessary, and I think Christians are their own worst enemy because they're always telling other people that they're doing Christianity wrong, like it's a right and wrong way to be a Christian. In some aspects, I get it in the sense of, you can't be a hypocrite. But as far as, hey, you're not shouting, so you're not a real Christian, or you didn't pass out, so you're not a real Christian. You didn't run laps around the church, so you're not a real Christian. God might not have told you to run around the church, or told me to run around the church, or whatever, or I didn't feel enough to pass out. That doesn't mean I wasn't listening. That doesn't mean that the word doesn't help me in some way. But yeah,
I used to like to watch the women different hats. They used to kill the hats. But I guess I'll say at the end of my whole conspiracy phase, what I realized is that knowledge is infinite, and that I know a whole lot about a little bit. And as long as I know what I know, I can teach you a lot about a computer. I can teach you a lot about that. But don't ask me how to fix a car. That's not my thing. That's just not my thing. Maybe the computer in the car, maybe. Don't ask me how to fix a car. I'm good at computers. Stick to computers. But yeah, at the end of my whole Illuminati phase and stuff, after I done scared myself, Baphomet, this, and that, not saying that stuff is not real. There is churches, the Luciferian churches with the Baphomet symbol in it. Through all that research, I realized that all the signs among all the nations are the same. And okay, so they got a picture of Baphomet. He got one hand down and one hand up. If you look at most Jesus signs, Jesus does the same thing in depiction. But who's to say that's real? Who's to say that's fake? And I left all that alone to start studying African culture. So I learned who Heru, Asar, and Aset is. I learned all the nations have the same story of Adam and Eve. It's just told differently. So that means the story of Adam and Eve is real. You just don't know when it took place, what nation, or whatever. But every movie you watch starts the world in Egypt. People do understand Egypt is Africa. I know people who think Egypt is Egypt. You know what I'm saying? Africa has the most nations. I like to play with people. It's like, girls be like, I only talk to black people. I be like, would you talk to a Moroccan? And they be like, no. It's like, that's a black person. No, it's not. Would you talk to French Montana? Yeah, he's Moroccan. He's African. You know, the further you are from the inside of Africa, the lighter your skin tones get. So people think French Montana is Middle Eastern. He's African. Same thing with Nipsey. He's Eritrean. He's African. That's why his face is shaped that way. That's why his nose is like that. That's why he sound like that, because he was Eritrean. But a big thing, I think all that led to me understanding that I was an empath. My thirst for knowledge, I ain't gonna say it turned me into an empath, because that's a gift. And Tony, you're an empath as well. So I kind of want you to explain in your words what that is and how that has affected you on your journey being an empath. Can you kind of tell me when you understood that you were one?
Well, that was something else I actually started getting into as far as astrology. I used to, and it messes me up because, again, like I said earlier, I have an Aquarius moon, but I do find myself, I guess we did this in the past, but if you don't know what an empath is someone who can kind of absorb other people's feelings and experiences as if they're their own. And looking back at it, I could probably go as young as 5 years old watching, something on TV, and it affected me so much that I just couldn't watch it anymore. Just absorbing other people's emotion. If you talk to me and you relate to me enough, I'm able to understand, what you're going through. I use it mostly probably as a songwriter. When I write for people, I like to sit down and take in their emotional state and what they're going through, and I'll write them pretty good songs. I actually didn't realize it till reading some things in my chart. So there's these things called houses, and my sun is in the 8th house on my natal chart. And because that's the complete opposite sign of my Taurus, which the natal chart for the 8th house is Scorpio, it makes me an empath. Again, those Scorpio placements are kind of tricky, and Mo having that Scorpio moon is probably indicative to him being an empath as well. But yeah, my sun in the 8th house makes me okay. I see that. Makes me an empath by the natal chart standards, and me discovering that kind of helped me process my emotions. It also helped me to realize that I need to separate my emotions from other people's emotions. That if I'm around someone too much, I can absorb too much of them and start not necessarily becoming them, but becoming less of myself and accept more of what's around me. And that's good. It's great in relationships. It's bad if the relationship is bad. It's bad if the person that you're being around or that you're around is a negative influence emotionally on you. So it kind of helps you, which would take you to the next stage of my spirituality. Watch the energies that are around you. I didn't really start getting into energies until I did a DNA test to see where you're from. And it's funny because mine actually was wrong the first time, and they came back and told me like 2 years later, like, oh, we made a mistake. But it said something about being Nigerian, and it's from this area called Benin, and they with y'all might call it voodoo, but it's voodoo and Ifa in Nigeria. And I started to practice that, and as I was practicing Ifa,
so you was tapping into your black magic.
I was definitely all into black magic.
Hold on, give them more. Hold on. You got to give them more. It was just so. It kind of makes sense why you tapped into it, because something you said earlier, not to cut you off, but you did say when you first started you was into death, and that it be perceived as dark. And we all know in black magic, that's sacrificial stuff, which is tied to the Illuminati. And what people see the Illuminati as, which is to illuminate or shine light. For those who don't know, the devil was not just considered the god of sound, but also the god of light. But for those who do believe in Christian days, God does say, I created everything, the good and the evil. That means the good and the bad. I'm going to get back to that. I find that interesting that, all those things linked together, but, keep going into your story. Give me some more, Tony.
Well, with that said, like you said, death is sacrificial, and anything that you want, you will sacrifice something for it, whether that's the death of your time or whatever it may be. But I ended up getting a reading by a friend of mine's wife, and it was very enlightening. And over time, as I started, I guess, catering to the reading, I got into doing readings myself. Not just the card readings with tarot cards, but pendulum readings. I would do those particularly for people. And then after a while, I ended up stopping. I had, a lot of people don't believe in black magic and stuff like that, but it's very real. And if you don't know what you're doing with it, you can really mess yourself up.
So have you ever looked into white magic?
I know a little bit about white magic, but I believe that you have to stick with the magic that is for you. I don't go dealing. I know a lot of black people that deal with Santeria, but Santeria to me is for the Hispanic culture, and it is created therefore. Just like I probably actually encountered white magic first, dealing with Wiccans and working around Wiccans in Winston. Even though there are a lot of Christians up there, the Wiccan culture is very deep in the country. Out there. And in fact, in the country everywhere, you'll find a lot of black and white magic between black people, white people, Native Americans, what have you, just any kind of, you might want to call it tribal, but I think the better term is native roots for the people. But yeah, so between me digging into those things, I got into black magic or voodoo or Ifa, and I actually began to participate, making my due sacrifices where I had to make them. I didn't sell my soul. I didn't do anything gay. Most of the stuff is actually little trivial things, not trivial things, but in voodoo, it's really like you're serving the spirit, and you're channeling that spirit to do things for you. You see it a lot more often than you think. You might think you're just watching a regular music video, but if you go back and actually study the concepts of the music video and what they're doing, you'll see that they're actually channeling a certain energy to get a point across artistically.
So I'm glad you said that, because in music videos, Grammy performances, BET Awards, those are all rituals that you watch live. Anytime you see, not necessarily a pyramid, anytime you see an arc in a plane, in a flat plane, that is masonry. Anytime you see a checkerboard floor in a video, that is masonry. Anytime you see obviously the one eye covered up, that is ritual. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's evil, but they are paying tribute to something, whatever they believe in. And in most societies, most deities are males, but in most secret societies, they project the male as the god, but most secret quote-unquote societies understand that the matriarch is the all-being, the mother, the moon is the all-being force. Therefore, if you are a part of society that is highly male-dominated, then you might need to revise what you're doing, because there is no patriarch without matriarch. So, going that far, you weren't sacrificing no chicken, was you, Tony?
No, wasn't sacrificing no chicken. The altars in voodoo and Ifa are very practical. The most problematic thing I dealt with mine was the person I was dealing with probably had too many different energies and too many different altars and channeling too many different spirits in the house, and all those spirits don't necessarily get along with each other. But that might be a little deep for people's understanding. But all that to be said, spirituality is real, And you can't say you're spiritual and you don't believe in spirits, even if it's not necessarily a spirit of a deity. Um, you know the things that you carry down from your family, your grandmother, your grandfather who could have passed, and you have those traits, but they have nothing to do with your physical traits. It has nothing to do with your complexion, or how your eyes or how your nose is shaped. It's a spirit that you carried along with you. Maybe your grandmother was very peaceful, and you have that same spirit of peace in you. Those things kind of channel through who you're around.
So, interesting enough, do you know what eye shape and how your bone structure, do you know where that comes from?
No, tell me.
And that actually comes from the terrain in which your family is born in. A very rocky terrain, like Asian culture is very rocky, very mountainy. That's why they have slanted eyes, due to the terrain and their face is shaped a certain way. And you'll see, just depending on where you're from, I have very slanted eyes, which people pick and say, well, you part Asian. No, generally that means part of your bloodline really does come from Asia. Mm. And so wherever your family origin is, like I said about Nipsey Hussle, he's Eritrean. If you look up Eritrean people, they all probably have small noses. They all probably talk like that, sound like that, have the same vernacular. His own is just mixed with a West Coast type thing. So actually the terrain you're born into determines your bone structure and how your eyes are slanted.
Oh yeah, I've always believed that actually. That's why I kind of look at black people, if we're from Africa, or whatever part you want to be in Africa, but our hair doesn't necessarily need to grow so long, or doesn't have to grow wispy as it would for a white person that's growing up in Europe. You look at the animals in that area, like a bear or a wolf in the cold, they have that wispy hair the same way how white people would have the wispy hair. Our skin tone, of course, we take in a lot more sun and the plains where we grow up, so we have a lot more melanin and skin tone where we're at. People on mountains also usually are shorter and have larger lung capacities because they have to take in more air at the top of those mountains. So that is an interesting point you brought up.
Yeah, so Africa is home of both the tallest people in the world and the shortest people in the world. Do you know what those tribes are?
I think one of them is called the Pygmy.
Yeah, the Pekingese tribe is the shortest people, and the Dinka tribe is the tallest people. And the Dinka tribe is South Sudan. And the average height for a person there, male or female, is about 6'5". And they are so tall that American standard basketball rims is too short for them. So 10 feet, their rims is 12 feet, so they have to jump the dunk. And if you don't believe it, the tallest basketball player to ever play in the NBA, Manute Bol, is from South Sudan, part of the Pekingese tribe. So a lot of scientists believe that they grow so tall because the subtropical climate is so hot that their bodies are extended out more, so that when they sweat, they could cool off easier because they have longer limbs, and they would sweat less. Because studies show that animals in subtropical climates have longer limbs because they sweat so much. So I guess I would say for me, being an empath and a Virgo I'm not gonna say it's one of the worst mixes, but it's not always beautiful, trust me, because you want to know so much and you want to feel so much that sometimes a person might actually be okay. And even though you feel like they're not, sometimes as a Virgo, your mind can mess with your spiritual energy. And I notice a lot of times that my mind messes with my spiritual energy. But 9 times out of 10, when I think I'm right about something, I feel like I'm right. Especially when it comes to reading people's energy. It's like I can smell it. I can tell when something's wrong with people. But I got a question for you. Maybe a series of questions. 1, 2, 3. Do you feel like religion is necessary?
I think religion is the training wheels for you to get on the path of, I guess you could say, righteousness. Religion, some people might just be able to skip over that path and have an understanding of creation. I'm at the point now where I believe that every religion or spiritual preference is an example of creation, and those are just different paths to the same creator, whatever you may choose. I have friends that practice voodoo, I have friends that are Muslim, I have friends that are Christian, and as long as you understand the same respect and concept that we all come from a creator, that we are created from something, and that you have the obligation to create yourself, I believe that you are in the right path. I think the most flawed thing we do in religion is become servants without being creators. Serving is more like your training process of what you're supposed to do, and you have the obligation to pass down knowledge, to pass down energy, to pass down know-how to future generations. But I think that's where we kind of fall off with religion. So it's a blessing and a curse being in today's society of religion.
I guess this is my problem with religious people is that they read the Bible their whole life. They understand the infrastructure of church their whole life, but does not understand that Christianity and most religion is a royal language. And you use words like kings and bishops and stuff like that. It is a royal language. So, and you're supposed to be part of the kingdom. So for people not to understand that you are part of the holy kingdom, you are royalty, you're not a peasant. If you go to an infrastructure that makes you feel like a peasant, then you're probably going to the wrong infrastructure. Being in church, it is definitely, you are definitely part of a holy or a royal community. And if your church is not government, like even if you think about most churches, they have gold-plated collection plates and gold-plated this, and some of them got the Mason symbol inside of them in gold, and the preacher looks like, some of them a pimp. But the preacher has nice robes and garments, and then when you ushers, you got to wear the white gloves and you got to be dressed nice. There is an infrastructure, and it is royalty, especially in most cultures, especially in Christianity. So if you feel like you're a peasant, then something is wrong. But I got one more question for you before we wrap it up. Do you feel like you can be a spiritual person and religious at the same time?
That's a good question. I'm gonna say yes, but I don't believe that there's a longevity in both. I think you kind of gear yourself towards one or the other. But what it comes down to is, in being spiritual and religious, spiritual is your actual connection with God. Religious is the servitude or the process that you kind of go to get that connection with God. And it gets to a point to where in being religious, it can kind of limit your freedom of being spiritual. So what the real point in religion is, you're going to have your personal, you start to evaluate and to create your personal religion to kind of shape what your spirituality is and what your righteousness is. Not saying that it's self-righteous per se, but in the sense of, this is what my conscience or my belief, my heart, and my soul sits well with. Not necessarily according to anybody else's book, what the pastor says on Sunday, what any priest or whatever you say, or Babalawo for voodoo, but according to your spiritual connection with God and what God has said directly to you. I think the biggest not error in religion, but the biggest hurdle in religion is understanding that you have a direct relationship with your creator, and it is your duty to reach out to your creator and have that and nurture that connection for you to become a creator yourself, for you to become your God or goddess. If God created you, then you are a God, you are a goddess, or you are a creator yourself, and it's your obligation to display that power here on earth.
So I guess my take on it, and I do agree with a lot of things you said, I don't think you can be both. And this is why. I think, you can't, like you said, you can't do both for a long time. You're going to have to pick a side. But I think once you have that breakthrough and your mind reaches that, I got a Big Bang Theory that I'm going to talk about in one of my later episodes, but it's not the way you think, most people think it is. I look at the Big Bang Theory in two different ways, but I'm going to just bring it up now. It's when you have that Big Bang mentally and you break through and you experience a level of freedom. If you try to be religious with that, you are going to hurt yourself, because now you put the handcuffs on yourself. I believe it is okay to be saved and baptized and everything and still at some point reach a level of spirituality where you don't break away from it, but you have those holy anointments that allow you to be free and explore. It's like the Amish community. I think they're perfect. When you turn 18, they let you go into the real world and determine whether you want to live outside of your community or whether you want to remain Amish. I feel like that's how Christianity should be. There should be a point where they take off the handcuffs and say, you should be free to explore. If you return back to the church, then you should live by the rules governed by the church. But if you don't, we hope that the values that we gave you early in your life help you through your spiritual journey. And that's why, like, looking at Amish culture, which most people should, they live without power. Everything they do is handmade, handcrafted, and they are perfectly fine with oil lamps in 2019. There's actually Amish communities in Philadelphia. People would never think that. Just like there's trailer parks in Charlotte. But, my ignorant self didn't think that was there. And then my cousin was like, there's trailer parks everywhere in Charlotte. You just ain't looking. Sure enough, I went down the road. Nice big houses next to you. It's trailer park. It's like, wow, that's kind of, But I don't feel like you can be both. I feel like if you say you're religious but spiritual, it's like being in the ocean, but you're inside a fishbowl. Okay? And, you can break through your fishbowl and be in an aquarium, but going to SeaWorld ain't fun. I'd rather be the seal free than the seal in SeaWorld right now, because he can only do so much. And if you think about that concept, that's why the animals, after a while, they start killing their trainers, because they understand they're supposed to be free. They only going to attack that window in that cage so many times before they attack the person they get a chance to. And I feel like if you're young, be spiritual, be respectful, live by the rules that you're governed by. Christianity, the laws of Christianity, the laws of the Bible, you can apply to a spiritual life. You can still abide by your mother and your father. You can still eat in moderation. You can still give in moderation. You can still take in moderation and be spiritual. But it's the rules like, if you have sex before marriage, you're going to go to hell. It's that concept that threw me off. If you do this, you're going to hell. This is an abomination. This is a sin that you can't come back from. And that's what really just pulled me back and made me look like, okay. But one more story. I don't know if many people know this. I think it's called divinity schools when preachers go to school. When pastors go to divinity school, they learn about every religion. Whether it's Muslim, Hinduism, Buddha, they learn about all those practices. And at some point you are allowed to pick which road you want to go down. That is why the story of Heru or Sar and Set, it's the same as Virgin Mary. And this is how it goes. Heru being God, Asar being the king, Aset being the queen. Aset is just, I may have it mixed up, but Aset being, if you look at the story, you'll see it. But the representation of Virgin Mary is the same, but they view Virgin Mary as stronger than Jesus and God in this story. She is the equal but greater version of Virgin Mary. And they believe the king got his body parts cut up and spread apart the desert, and his spirit came back and got her pregnant. And that is when Jesus was born, as we see it. But my question to a preacher would be, if I was born in China, and in China it's weird, the way you born, your body shape determine what field you go into. So if I'm born a certain leaf, I could be a gymnast, I could be a doctor, or I might just be a factory worker. That's how they look at it. And I guess it works for them. So if I'm born in China, my question would be to a pastor or a super religious person. And all I was taught in this communist government was Buddha. Am I going to hell if I never even understood what Jesus was in the first place? Now, if somebody can answer that for me in truth, then yeah, if you're telling me that everybody born, Indians, everybody born into these different cultures are going to hell when they never understood what Jesus was or even knew what it was because they was forced to believe in what they had to believe in, then I just feel like I'm going to hell. It's too much information out there for it to be that simple. God is too complex for it to be that simple. Too understanding for it to be that simple. So I don't know how you look at that, but I just refuse to believe that a person born in China, raised to believe in Buddha is all they know, is going to hell. So I don't know how you look at that, but that's how I always looked at it, and that's what allowed me to be free. I seen a monk the other day. A real monk.
Yeah, I seen him at Concord Mills before.
Yeah, I seen him at the outlet. He had an orange. He had a little fanny pack thing, some sandals, and he was the happiest person there. It was like he was glowing. He was really like his brother or something. His brother was in regular American clothes, but he still had on his orange garments and stuff. It was kind of dope. I had never seen a monk before until 2 weeks ago. Tony, you got any last words for the people about spirituality? Anything you want to comment on? This would be that time where you put yourself out there. You got many businesses, many practices. What you want to lead the people with?
I mean, I could do my little shameless plugs here and there. But just do right. I don't know how else to put it, Be harmless, show love, do right when you can. Don't mean anybody any harm. Be free. Don't let anybody do any harm to you. But outside of that, this is Tony G, better known as Tony 7, actually the other way around. And Give 'Em Mo podcast.
And that's it, people. Give 'Em Mo. It's your favorite host who love to do the most, and I like to boast. Probably said that wrong, but it is what it is. It's a Give 'Em Mo podcast. This is an episode on spirituality. The intro comes to you by one of Tony's close friend, 8 Ball King. It's for every episode. This will be the first official episode. Like I said, it's going to come to you weeks later, but this is the first official episode. Timeless information. You get life experience. You get everything. We're just here to give you more. Thank you for tuning in.